program. I just hit record, so we're starting now. Also, feel free, as I mentioned, to share your video. It's great to see familiar faces, and having your video on it just helps engagement a lot. So feel free to do that. We also are encouraging you to freely ask questions. So you can do that either by raising your hand during the moderated Q&A portion of the event, or dropping your questions in the chat, which I will then incorporate into our Q&A, which will come after we meet the master plan. So feel free to drop those questions as you go along and as the questions come in your mind, or you can wait for the moderated question, and you can raise your hand and you can ask your question on screen to our presenters. All right, so without further ado, we can get started. I want to first introduce our panelists. Pamela Goucher first is the Deputy Director of Planning and Zoning at the City of Manchester. Pamela has been in the planning profession for over 40 years and with the City of Manchester since 1995. In 2001, she became the Deputy Director of the Planning Department, and in 2009, when the Planning Department merged with the Building Department, she became the Deputy Director of the Planning and Community Development Department, with a staff and complement of 34 members. In addition to her day-to-day management responsibilities, Pamela works closely with the planning staff, planning board, developers, and engineers in supporting business growth and housing opportunities in the city. She has been a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners since 1999 and is a graduate of the Rhode Island School of Design with a degree in architecture. Welcome, Pamela. And now Jody Nazaka, who is a senior planner at with the Planning and Community Development Department. Jody also serves on MYP's Community Engagement Committee and is very active in that role. Jody currently works for the City of Manchester as a senior planner. In this position, she supports the city's planned and managed development to ensure a healthy economic base, safe and livable neighborhoods, cultural opportunities, and quality public facilities. She currently oversees the master plan update, a process that will conclude with the community's fresh new vision of Manchester's future. Jody holds multiple certifications, including a certificate in creative placemaking from the Institute of Art and Design at New England College. She's an active member of the American Institute of Certified Planners and is currently pursuing an MBA in public administration at SNHU. In addition to her daily work as a planner, Jody is an active member of the Plan New Hampshire Board of Directors, MYP, of course, and Manchester Connects. Jody is a Manchester native, and she's excited to live, work, and play in her hometown. So without further ado, welcome Jody and Pamela. Thanks for being with us here today, and let's meet the master plan.
Great, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon and for meeting with us during your lunch hour. So what we're going to do today is go over a kind of an accelerated run through of the master plan, how it started, where we were, and where we are now. So a few little housekeeping issues to start with, or not really issues, but a few little housekeeping bits to start with is this plan is all the images we'll be sharing with you today are straight from the draft plan. And I say draft because it is just that right now, it is draft. We are hoping to wrap this up and have a public hearing set with the planning board for late June. So once the planning board adopts it, then it will become the official document. But for right now, these are just draft images, and we will run through them with you today. We're very happy to present these images. They're extremely visually, these graphics are very visually enhanced. And we owe that to our consultant that was hired, Town Planning and Urban Design Collaborative. They played a major part in this master plan update, and we're very fortunate that we got a chance to work with them. They're a nationally recognized, if not worldwide, recognized worldwide consulting firm in the planning field. So here we are, so a new vision of Manchester. So to start, so what is a master plan? For anyone that's not familiar with what a master plan is, minimize this. The master plan is the official adopted statement for future development and conservation in the city. It establishes a vision and sets guiding principles on how to achieve the vision. It analyzes existing conditions, considers emerging trends, describes and illustrates a plan for future development, and will serve as the foundation for determining effective public policy and land use decisions for the future. The last master plan was adopted by the planning board in 2009. These plans are typically updated every 10 years as a general rule of thumb. However, they can be updated more frequently, or some communities haven't updated theirs in many years. So here in Manchester, we like to follow that 10-year update. So where we were. So we're going to run through where we were with the current plan that was adopted in 2009 before we dive into the new plan. So this is what the current master plan looks like. This was adopted by the planning board in 2009. Pamela Goucher here played a major role in playing as lead staff support for that. So she's going to give a rundown of how the planning process worked for 2009, and then I'll explain how the planning process is now different.
So just to kind of give you a sense of where we were back in 2009, and actually back that up a few years to 2007, we began the process of updating the previous master plan. We didn't have the funding available to hire an outside consulting firm, so we did the entire master plan in-house. We hired another staff member to actually kind of, be the lead person, working with myself, working with the steering committee, but basically focusing on nothing but the master plan for almost 2 years. We had a group of people representing the steering committee that were representatives of the planning board. We had someone from Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission, number of staff members, someone from DPW. And we met on a fairly regular basis. All of our meetings were public, as in the public could choose to join in and listen to what we had to say, but we didn't have nearly the exposure that this current master plan has had with social media, with the public meetings, and all of that. We basically started, as I said, in 2007 with a series of white papers, if you will, issue statements that looked at housing and the economic development, the parks and recreation, transportation. And that was our starting point when we went forward to the steering committee and shared that information. And then we had meeting after meeting after meeting where we took one section at a time. You can see on the screen the listing of the sections of the current master plan, community profile, historic Manchester. So the steering committee just tackled each of these sections one at a time. Some took much longer than others. And obviously at the end of this process, we kind of just went through everything to feel comfortable with it. One of the things that I'll just mention to you is the state statute mandates that the planning board develop a master plan, but there's very limited requirements. The master plan has to have a vision for the city, and the master plan has to have a land use that explains how that vision will come to fruition. Manchester, for the most part, has always delved further, and the state statute says you can explore a number of categories. And the ones you see on the screen currently are how they were addressed back in 2009, and the current in draft master plan follows much of this. Because of the differences between the original, I'll call it the current plan, although it doesn't feel current right now. Emphasis changes. For example, I think back in the 2009 master plan, I think we had a vacancy rate of apartments like at 7%. And as many of you know today, that vacancy is hovering around 1 to 2%. 7% is more like a national average, and 1 or 2% means that housing stock is reduced, opportunities are reduced, prices are up. So we have obviously different focus each kind of 10-year cycle that we go through, but much of it is the same. And, we try to follow through the follow-up, what we've accomplished from the last one, where we are today, and what we hope to accomplish moving forward. So in a nutshell, basically, it was all done in-house with staff. And while it's a decent document, it doesn't have nearly the level of detail that the current one that we're working on will have to share with the board. And as Jody said, we're going to go to the planning board, hopefully in late June, to get the current plan adopted by the planning board. And once the planning board adopts it, then we would do a presentation to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. We always look to have the policymakers endorse the plan. They don't do an adoption, but if they endorse it, it makes it easier as we move down the years and try to explain to the policymakers why some of the things that we're talking about make sense. And oh, by the way, you did endorse this, so we hope that you will support it. So I think that's all I need to say, and Jody, go forward.
So that was a great intro about the 2009 plan and where we kind of were, where we are as we led up to our new document. Now, before we switch over to talking about the new document, I do want to say this one in front of you. In 2009, I was working in Londonderry, New Hampshire, and I remember this plan, once it was adopted, being the talk of the region, the talk of the state, really. This was really groundbreaking in its format, its number of pages. It was, I think, around 22 pages, really easy to read, really graphically heavy. So it was kind of setting the foreground for a lot of communities to switch to this direction. So even though we don't hate it, we still love it. We still think it's a great document, but let's show you where we are. So you saw where we were, and here's where we are. Now, this is the new vision for Manchester. We took a much different approach when we decided the layout, or when we wanted to work with the layout for this. Now, a master plan, as Pamela mentioned, and as we said in the beginning, it's a guiding document for the vision of the community. Now, a lot of communities use these documents as land use planning tools, and that's it. In Manchester, we wanted to take it a step further, and we wanted to use it not only as a land use planning tool, but also a way to promote the city. So the idea is we used a magazine style format. It's very graphically heavy. It can be used if the mayor wants to provide it to a potential new business, if economic development director wants to promote the city. This can be a tool to help promote the city, not only guide development. So we're really happy with the way it turned out. So, we already kind of touched on a little bit of, what changed from 2009 to currently. There's a lot that's changed. The country had a recession, the housing recession. We've bounced back from that. We now have a pandemic that we're coming out of. So the plan takes a lot of that in consideration. Plan also takes into consideration a lot of previous plans and efforts that have been in place. And here's just a list of some of the few plans. There's many that this plan will reference and also builds off of. Most recently, you can see the Manchester Connects action kits are referenced in here. So no work that is ever undertaken by any nonprofits or community groups or even city departments goes unnoticed when we're creating a master plan. We look at things, even the 2006 Parks Master Plan, although it may be outdated, there's a lot of content in there that is still relevant when we were moving forward. So we certainly look towards a lot of previous documents to help guide the vision for this document. So to talk a little bit more about the differences of the previous plan to this plan, as Pamela mentioned, there was a lot of closed door committee meetings where they addressed each section individually. Now for this process, because this is a new time, we're in 2020, or when this was all happening, it was 2019 and 2020, so we're in 2021 now. And times have changed. Social media has a huge presence, and we certainly wanted to use that to our advantage. So for the planning process for this, it was very engagement heavy. The city held a series of public events and meetings to obtain public input, and each meeting and format was, the timing and format was a little bit different to maximize participation. Some meetings were held on weekends, some were after hours, some were during the day, some provided child activities and child care. So we tried to make sure that we could touch upon as many different groups as possible. And we also went to a lot of the communities too. So not only did we provide meetings at City Hall and local venues, but we also went to some neighborhood community centers to hold some meetings. We held individual policymaker interviews for aldermen that were interested in participating. We had a think tank established, which some might consider similar to a subcommittee. However, the difference with a think tank is it was a group of people that were really interested in the process and would almost act as a champion for the development of the plan and pushing forward, promoting the engagement opportunities. So we're really thankful for the think tank members that were part of this. The biggest event we had was Plantapalooza. That was a 7-day long planning event. And boy, was it 7 days. It was 24 hours a day for 7 days straight. The consultants were in town. They did not, I'm pretty sure they did not eat or sleep. They just were holding meeting after meeting and brainstorming. And even when they went out to dinner, they were still talking about Manchester and the vision that they were hearing.
And we were running back and forth trying to support them with whatever they needed. Oh, you need some more stands, you need some more trace paper, you need more whatever. We were pretty much on call, the whole planning staff for that week they were here.
So a much different, much different way of going about it than we did in 2009. And what we did in 2009 wasn't necessarily wrong. We just knew in 2019 through 2021, we wanted this to be an actual document that 100% reflected the people and stakeholders of Manchester.
I just want to correct one thing. The meetings we had in 2009 weren't closed door.
No.
They were open, and every agenda had at the bottom something that said, any questions, comments from the public, but we didn't get a lot of interest from the public. And I blame that basically on the lack of the social media that we have today. So if we had had more of that back then, we may have had a lot more interest back in the 2008-9 time period. But we weren't trying to shut anyone out. We just didn't feel like there was a lot of interest as there has been with this current plan.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No. So again, some of the other opportunities we offered to participants, we had this thing called on the table meetings. So if people weren't available for some of the larger in-person meetings that took place, we welcomed them to host their own personal meetings. And that could be over a book club, it could be a neighborhood cocktail hour, it could be a group of friends just socializing over a board game. There was no limits to what these on the table meetings looked like. And through that, we got 10 privately held meetings that provided all different types of information. I believe in the picture you're seeing right here on the top left, that was a transportation focused group. So we had some housing focused groups or neighborhood focused groups. So we got a really great mix of input based on those on the table meetings. We also held HUD consolidated plan focus groups that talked a lot about housing opportunities and the needs of the communities when it comes to housing and community improvement funding. As we already mentioned, social media was a huge part in promoting this. We provided a website, planmanchester.com. We blasted on the city Facebook page. We had posters hanging around the downtown. We also had a collaboration with St. Mary's Bank, and they had postcards in all of their lobbies and waiting rooms. So we really tried to get the word out as much as possible. And the reason why we're going into so much detail explaining this is because this is what formed the vision. This is what formed the plan, is input from everyone in the city. This isn't just input from staff members. We almost just acted as the conduit to help get the information from the people to the consultant. We also had an art contest. We opened it up to all residents of Manchester. We had many participants submit all kinds of different works. We had photography, we had hand pieces of art, we had all different types.
We had a lot of children that participated with their drawings and their visions of
so we had participants all the way from age 7 all the way to 60 submit, and this image in front of you, this is the first place winner. The winner was decided by the public during Plantapalooza, and this was voted as #1 by Angus O'Leary, and it has a 2-page spread in the plan. So we're really highlighting that public participation. And as we mentioned, Plantapalooza was a 7-day event. And what was really unique about this event is that it was held at the Hilton Downtown Doubletree Hotel during the same weekend as Comic-Con. So we really tried to play off of the whole time we were there, we had all different types of comic book characters and cosplay coming in and sitting in our meetings. And it was just, it was so memorable that we wanted to make sure that it made its way into the plan. So if some people are wondering what the comic book look is, that explains it a little bit. And here's some photos from that event. We had Swamp Thing, Batman, Alien, Pink Panther, Spider-Man. It was really interesting, and it made for some obviously interesting photos and a really interesting part of the plan that we wanted to make sure was translated into that.
Some of them just sat right down in some of the group sessions and participated like the rest of the members that showed up. It was fun.
So here's some of the things we heard during this, year-long information gathering session. Improve the gateways into the city, develop the Riverwalk, improve neighborhoods, bring services to the west side, bring innovative businesses downtown, create more vibrant corridors into the community, allow for higher density mixed-use buildings, protect the cedar swamp, more transportation options. The list goes on and on. So we took what we heard from the people, and through what we heard, we created the vision. And the vision of the city is very similar to a lot of the vision and mission statements that your organizations have. There's statements made about who we are, what we value, and where are we going. So it's very similar in that aspect. So through what we heard, we created the vision, and then we kind of broke it down into these guiding principles. Now, these guiding principles help us categorize all of the recommendations and basically help us in a way of tracking the implementation of the recommendations in the plan. They also set the tone of, as a city, how we want to move forward. We want to be financially responsible. We want an economic vibrancy to the city. So all of these guiding principles are very specific and unique to Manchester. Now we're going to go through and show you a few examples of some of the recommendations that are in the plan. There's 119 pages of recommendations for the city. So we're just going to provide a quick overview of a few of them. Again, this is an accelerated version of an intro to the master plan. Would definitely encourage everyone, if they're interested in this, to, when we set the public hearing with the planning board, to participate in that and have the opportunity to have an engaged conversation with the planning board, since they are the ones that are adopting this. But here's one example of something that, through communication with residents and stakeholders, what we heard. And what we heard was that a lot of residents wanted to see separated bike lanes and multi-use paths. So that's a recommendation in the plan. We also wanted to make sure that there were very detailed and well thought out examples provided. So when someone does present a plan, we can point to some really good examples. Another recommendation that we've been talking about for many years now is optimize local and commuter transit service and the potential to connect Boston, Nashua, and Manchester through rail. That's been a goal for many years. And it was a goal of the 2009 plan. So we certainly wanted to see that carry through. So here are some recommendations for improving transportation in the city. Another recommendation that we heard a lot about was housing. Pamela already touched on the vacancy rates, how different and drastically different those are from 2009 to now. So here are some recommendations for innovation in housing. How can we think about housing in more unique ways? We have a couple of recommendations about encouraging inclusionary zoning, consider community land trusts. There's several pages in the master plan that go on to speak about innovation in housing. This is just a quick snapshot. And one thing to mention, Pamela noted this the other day when we were chatting, that a lot of the stats you'll see in this document refer back to either 2019 or 2020 numbers. These numbers change so frequently that it's so hard to reference them because they change so frequently. But we do put a disclaimer in the beginning that these are snapshot numbers from 2020. So they can't be, 5 years from now, they shouldn't be looked at as accurate numbers, but it gives the reader a good idea of where the city was at in 2020 when this was adopted.
I'm just going to jump in for a moment when we're talking about housing. I think back in 2009, I think we had around a 50-50 split between home ownership and rental units. And you'd like to have usually a little higher number of units owner occupied. It usually adds to a little more stability within a community. With the way the housing prices are going right now and people's ability to afford to purchase, and even, there's been a lot of articles about whether millennials are anxious to jump into housing market or if they're content to sit back a little and wait for, better times, and so they're looking for rental. So I'm not sure when this all shakes out and where we're at today. 2 or 3 years from now, I will be curious to see what the breakdown is between owner-occupied units and rental occupancy. So, as Jody said, they just keep changing, and we just do the best to kind of have the snapshot in time and then try to work with our goals moving forward after the plan is adopted.
And although we said that these plans are typically adopted every 10 years, they are very fluid, and they do have the ability for us to make changes and update throughout those 10 years. So they're not, set in stone for 10 years. They are pretty fluid. So now we're going to get into some of the fun part of the master plan. In my opinion, the whole master plan is fun, but these are some of the images that were created from the Plantapalooza sessions and from the big ideas that we heard from community members. And also the benefit of hiring an outside consultant is they were not, they had no biased opinion. They had no, the previous experience with Manchester. So this was an honest view of the city in their first impressions, and they thought the mill yard was so cool. So one of the images, they actually took this photo while they were in town. And then based on input they heard from the community members and what they saw, the direction of the city going in, they created this sketch. Now, what's so cool about this is, they're filling in, I'm sure I can go back. So what you see here is, a lot of pavement and a lot of openness right here. Not a whole lot of areas of respite, areas to congregate, and, not a safe place for anyone to cross right here. So what they did here is, they created this area underneath is parking. So you're not losing any of the parking. It's built up so that you can park underneath it, but also have an area where you can, enjoy yourself when you're in the mill yard to kind of come out of your office and enjoy some shade trees, see all the innovative tech stuff that's happening in the area. They reintroduced a canal as a conversation piece, as a decorative feature in the mill yard. And these are all things that are possible if we just kind of think outside the box a little bit.
And opening of the canals has been something that different boards, Board of Mayor and Aldermen over the years have brought up in discussion too. So it's doable.
And here's another one. This is an aerial view of Arms Park along the river and then the parking lot adjacent to it. We always refer to this as Arms Park, but it's really mostly a parking lot. And the consultants saw this as such a missed opportunity, which we always know it is, but there's constraints when it comes to contamination of the site and stuff that was buried underneath there. But that doesn't mean development there is impossible. So they took major liberties and made these images of, open areas for people to congregate, interactive features that will bring families and tourism down to the river, green roofs, solar power. So this is a real, technological, innovative approach to kind of enhancing the mill yard. Again, the area of parking is not gone. It's just hidden. It's hidden with internal parking structures, with retail and residential surrounding it. Really heavy on the mixed use, really heavy on the areas of placemaking. And here, this is the section of the Gaslight District. So this is Granite Street right here, Elm, the SNHU Arena, Fisher Cat Stadium over here. Again, a lot of opportunities. This is prior to the photo was taken prior to the SNHU parking garage being constructed, but the consultant was aware of it at the time. So they developed this. Here, it's heavy on the infill. The idea here isn't for anything to be eliminated. Nobody leaves. WMUR is still a presence. SNHU is still a presence. It's just how can we get creative with infill to kind of meet the parking need that's needed in the mill yard, but also create a really welcoming, gateway into the city that opens up as you drive up to the arena. So again, just taking liberties. Here they had sketched out a potential rail station. There's talks of this as a location, the TOD plan, and also the master plan, reference a rail station further south near MTA. So these are just great images that kind of show you what can happen in the city. There's really no limits. And again, this last one, we heard a lot during the sessions about utilizing the islands in the river. They're kind of a missed opportunity when it comes to recreation. So they did this, connecting a potential river walk to from the mills onto the islands, amphitheater style, all kinds of different opportunities, some boating opportunities for kayak launches. The options are endless here if we just kind of think a little bit outside of the box. So with that, I think that's all we have. Again, this was an accelerated version. So I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that we didn't have a chance to touch upon today. But again, these are all considered draft images until the planning board adopts this. Again, hopefully that'll be at the end of June sometime. And as soon as that date is set, we will certainly share that with the Young Professionals group to get that posted. We want to provide enough time from when we set the hearing to when it actually happens that the public has, a good amount of time to review the document and come prepared with any questions or comments.
And I'm just going to add one comment about the when Jody was showing all of these visions that the consultants worked with us on producing based on some of the feedback from the public. And we know that some people will look at this and say, this is pie in the sky, this is never going to happen. But if you think about some of the great places in the country, that have great river walks, that have developed, you just go look in Boston and look what they did when they buried some of the highway. It was a 20-year project, et cetera. But it's not that we think all of this is going to happen immediately, but if you don't start with some interesting and exciting visions, you're doomed to never ever get out of the rut and never get something exciting and to be developed. So I know that there'll be lots of people that will see this and say, I'm never going to do that, don't know why they bother. But for us, it's really important to make sure it gives people an opportunity to think about the possibilities, even if those the possibility of it coming to fruition maybe 20 years from now.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. Definitely a lot of chat action going on. We did get one question, and this question may be for you, Pamela, but do you know what the breakdown of the rental versus owner occupied rate is in Manchester now? Has that changed since this plan was developed?
Since this plan or the 2009 plan, it was just a little bit more than 50-50 owner occupied versus rental. I didn't check it recently, but I think that it's slid. I think the owner occupancy has slid down a little bit and the rental numbers have gone up. Mm-hmm. I know we have it in-house. I just don't recall what that percentage is.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. And just for the audience as well, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask your questions if you do have any. I do have some that I can include as well. One being, and this is definitely an opinion-based question for both you, Jody and Pamela. If you could see one piece of this plan come to fruition in the next 10 years, which would you choose and why?
Wow, we get to only pick one, Jody. You go.
I would have to say expanding the river walk. And just any way that, if it's not fully, building out the islands for recreation, but seeing a river walk, at least part of a river walk. And I feel like our river is such an asset to our city. So that's what I would pick.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm on the same page with Jody. Even though some of the other elements that were shown are more of a boost to economic development and transportation, I've said all along, to have a river that we have along in the city, and unfortunately it splits the city because we have the east side and the west side, but to have this river through the city and not maximize its potential. I mean, we started with the Riverwalk development and to a certain extent the rails and trails that sort of go off of it quite some time ago, and it just needs to keep being pushed along. I mean, we had the Hands Across the Merrimack 10, 12 years ago. People thought that would never happen, but we have that connection from the east to west side, and it ties into the Riverwalk. So I think it would be great if we could get more along the Riverwalk also. And as Jody pointed out with, quote, Arms Park, you know, we just talk about Arms Park is, you know, 30, 40 feet wide, and then it's of asphalt. And, you know, perhaps when you look at what the pandemic has done to a lot more remote working, you know, maybe people will realize, yes, we need parking, we need accessibility, but maybe we don't need to prioritize that quite in the same way people felt we needed to 10 years ago. So yes, get the riverfront up and exciting place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely agree with all you said there. Quick follow-up, what obstacles do you see in the way of really moving that along? I'm thinking specifically about the islands. Like there must be some environmental considerations that you guys might know and can foresee. Just wondering if you can share some of that with us as well.
Yeah, the first obstacle would be that the city doesn't own those islands.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's obstacle number one. And just the infrastructure, again, because that area of the river tends to flood and, you know, the water level raises and lowers so frequently in the spring and fall that, you know, just getting the proper infrastructure in there will obviously be pretty costly when it comes to not just engineering it, but also building it. So that's one major constraint to that actually happening. And it's also, you know, community support. Everyone has their own opinion in the city, and not everyone agrees how money should be spent. So some may see the dollars going towards that as better spent elsewhere. So those are probably the two number one constraints that I could think of.
And to jump on that, as far as the cost, what sometimes happens with policymakers is, you know, you've got a limited pot of money, you have to figure out how to spend it. And you'll often hear someone say, well, I'm not going to support that art project when we need more housing or we need more mental health. What is important for policymakers and everyone to try to understand is art and beautification, parks, they all lead to a more vibrant city. So if you have to make sure your city is a place people want to come and work and live. And if investing money to make the place look better, to have more exciting opportunities, you have to balance them. So I don't think anyone would accuse a policymaker of spending money for, you know, expanding a river walk, for example, because they don't care about homeless, or they don't care about mental health. I think it all is the big picture, and they have to take that into consideration. And there will be some that probably won't. They won't see that as being a goal, or won't see it as being that beneficial. But certainly from our perspective, our backgrounds, we know that will really help make a city. I mean, Portsmouth is a great city for a lot of reasons, and they have a lot of strict design criteria. They have a lot of walkable places, and you know, you wonder, well, why does everyone want to go there, and why is it expensive to live there? Well, because they've made it a very cool city. So you have to balance it all, but certainly the policymaker decisions on how to spend money is a big part of how far we can go forward with some of these visions.
Awesome. Yeah, great answer. And thank you so much. Molly, I see you have your hand up. Feel free to jump on in.
Yes, I don't know how to put my hand down, but hopefully it'll be there.
I got it.
Thank you so much for being here, Pamela and Jody. I am just love everything about this. I work in fundraising professionally and don't know a lot about grant writing, but I think there are federal funds available for lots of projects. At least I've come to understand that in my professional and personal life. Is there any way the city could apply for grants to support, or perhaps thinking of creative ways the city could fund this? It's not the job of your office, but it seems like there's a lot of things without fiscal notes or expensive ideas in here.
And you're right, there are a lot of grants out there. Our highway department and our department have been involved in several of the grant funds that we've been going after. And I think probably it's a shame that the city does not have a grant writer for the city.
Right.
Within our department, we administer the lead program. And so every cycle, 3-4 years, we're writing a new proposal to get more HUD monies in for lead remediation. And we've been successful with, I think, 4 full grants now. The health department gets a lot of grants for their work. Highway, goes down that path. But there isn't a grant writer for the city of Manchester that we could all kind of clamor on and say, hey, I heard there's this great grant for expanding parks or building more bike lanes. Can you go look into it and go off on your way? Because you're right, our department doesn't have the capacity to be able to just go after some of those funds, but we're always happy to hear about available funds that people are going after.
And I have a second follow-up similar question. So I learned, I'm on the city planning board as an alternate, and I learned in a planning training over the weekend that a master plan is not a governing document. So someone couldn't approve or deny a request for land use in the city based on document, but we could, what does that exactly mean? Like, how is the document used in land use decisions?
It's more of a guiding document. So one example we like to use is, for this document, we're kind of saying, we want more inclusionary zoning. So we want to allow more mixed uses in some of the strictly residential districts that we currently have. So that's a statement that's made in the master plan. So down the line, if a local developer or a local property owner wants to suggest to rezone their area because it shows in the master plan that it's to be rezoned, that's kind of more support for their request. Because the document is a vision of people of the city. But in the contrary, if they're coming to the board mayor and alderman for a request that's contradicting the master plan, the master plan can be used to say, well, this doesn't follow the vision of the people of the city, so we don't really think that it's appropriate. It also sets the tone for updates to the zoning ordinance, and I don't know if Pamela wants to touch on that a little bit more, but we're hoping as soon as the master plan gets adopted that we're going to roll right into a major overhaul of the city zoning ordinance to reflect some of the kind of bold statements that are made in the master plan.
Yeah, because once a master plan is adopted, if your zoning ordinance and regulations are not in step, you've got to address it. The zoning ordinance has had so many minor tweaks over the 25 years I've been with the city. I think the last major overhaul was in 2001, but we've had a few pieces here and there all along the way. But we are looking to, as Jody said, once this is under wraps, we're looking to move to the next stage. And I believe we're going to be hiring a consultant to look into that and help us, because again, these projects are huge, and the staff in our department has a number of projects that we have on a day-to-day basis. And to take this on, whether it's a master plan or a zoning ordinance rewrite, in a holistic new fashion, just looking at everything, it would take a staff person at least a good year to just focus on that and have nothing else to be doing. And that's just hard. We don't have that capability. So we are going to be doing that so that, hopefully they'll be in lockstep, and it would be nice to get that zoning ordinance updated and brought in the short term as opposed to too far down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. And quick follow up on zoning. We do have a few small business owners who are with us today on this program, and speaking directly to kind of re-envisioning the different corridors and neighborhoods throughout the city versus focusing mainly on the downtown Elm Strip and the Mill Yard. To my knowledge, it seems like those zoning ordinances really are red tape for some of that redevelopment. So just wondering if you can speak a little bit to that, and maybe what other areas other than the Gaslight District that you see being kind of like ripe for some development.
I guess there are pockets throughout the city that, I mean, Webster Street's a little neighborhood business area. There's some Kelly Street, the Hollows. There are little pockets throughout the city where there's some small businesses that probably would do well to bolster that.
Mm.
And I think that what we would like to see, as Jody alluded to, we would like to see more mixed use. We'd like to see kind of a reduction in just single family zoning, and we'd like to see the mixed use spread out. So just because there's, not a little business neighborhood in one part of the city right now, doesn't preclude it from potentially becoming a little developed area. And I think we keep a pretty open mind about how that would work. If it works with the residents in an area, if it doesn't impact traffic to a huge degree, to the detriment of those around them, I think we all want to be supportive of encouraging the economic growth throughout the city.
Yeah, and we certainly don't, and Pamela and I don't speak for everyone, but what we've heard is a lot of people in the city like those neighborhood amenities. They like to be able to walk to a coffee shop or a corner store or a local restaurant or brewery. And if they didn't want those types of amenities, they likely wouldn't be living in Manchester. They'd be in some of the more rural communities outside of the city. So we keep that in mind too. You're going to have those naysayers that say they don't want those businesses, and sometimes you hear them louder than the people that do want them. But that's something we keep in mind when we were developing this plan and then moving forward into the zoning ordinances, that the majority of people that live in a city such as the size of Manchester want those types of amenities.
Yeah, absolutely agreed there as well. We have another really great question from the chat. So someone's wondering about how the plan is going to address climate change. I think it was included in your presentation. So any insight on that is, really interesting.
Yeah.
Other than the replanting of trees and greening up the city.
Yeah, so the plan certainly touches on that. It's, small steps here and there, replanting trees, creating, getting away from the heat island effect. And, we hear a lot from DPW that they don't like trees because they become a maintenance issue when it comes for, tree trimming with, trucks going down the street or sidewalk plowing because of the roots coming up. But trees actually really do a lot to reduce the heat island effect. It also is a big benefit to public health for an older community or anyone that's walking down the street and providing shade for them. It helps with public health. So in addition to those types of things, we're also looking to improve stormwater infrastructure and drainage. The city has always made a big commitment towards greenways and the rail trails and connecting conservation land. The Hackett Hill area has a major area of conservation, so that's a big part in the plan, is to preserve that. So there's no specific section that addresses climate change. However, there's recommendations that address climate change on their own, if that makes sense.
More sustainability and that nature of that.
Mm-hmm.
We do have, and I don't know if it's going to progress over the years, but doing something as simple as pervious pavement as opposed to impervious pavement. That's something that we occasionally see from time to time. Until it becomes more the norm, though, you have to be careful because there's a different way of treating and preparing pervious versus impervious pavement. So the highway department has never been a huge fan of that to date, but with private development, we've had a few where they've said they just want to, create the pervious pavement, and as long as they, as private landowners, make sure they're doing the right thing, which for those that you may or may not know, as opposed to seal coating and putting down some more pavement, you really have to vacuum the pavement on a more regular basis. It's just a matter of how you, over time, you take care of it. So things like that could certainly add to reducing the overall effect of runoff from pervious pavement and increasing the capacity in our drainage system.
Awesome. And this is a quick follow-up question. It might be more of a clarifying one. As far as like the planting of trees, does the plan specifically address planting trees on city property, or is it more on the landowners, throughout the city to kind of get on board and really buy into that plan and those updates?
It more so addresses, well, it kind of both. It's, including more trees on public streets, but also, we get new plans presented to us at the planning board level. We have certain regulations that require developers to put in X amount of trees on private property. So we certainly would continue to practice that regulation. But the master plan talks more about greening public streets and creating more of, when you look at a street, like Kelly Street's a great example of that. There's very little trees, if any, down Kelly Street. And you can do a quick Photoshop of what it would look like if there were trees down that street. And it completely changes the feel, and it changes, the presence that a pedestrian would have on that street. So it's a little bit of both, I'd say.
And we work really well with our highway department. There's a great bunch of guys that we deal with on a regular basis. But if there's ever a rub between us and them, it's when they want to make the sidewalks wider and cut down the trees because of what Jody mentioned earlier. We want to make sure the plows can get in. We don't want to have to trim them all the time. They're in the way of the utility wires, and et cetera, et cetera. And I get it. It's not lost on me, but I'm not going to look at it in that linear fashion as an engineer when I know the benefits of adding trees, what it does to a neighborhood. I mean, just temperature control. If you take Kelly Street and added 25 trees in a few block area, you would help the temperature in a hot summer day when those trees matured and created some shade. So it's kind of like a running joke. I've been giving the engineers crap for years about things like that. It's always going to be. I'm going to advocate for trees, and they're going to advocate for cutting them down or not planting them in the first place.
So we're coming up on time, so we're just going to go with one more question. And this kind of goes back to a few of the questions kind of popping around on the chat is, how can we as community members and leaders get involved to help move this plan along, specifically from like a YP standpoint, but also from that business leader and engaged citizen standpoint. In your opinion, how can we make the most impactful, just make the most impact on moving this plan along and making sure we get some of these things come to fruition?
I would say staying informed is a major piece of that. Staying informed and hearing what projects are in the pipeline moving forward. And if there's something that you as a resident or stakeholder support, I think getting out there and voicing your support for any of these projects is certainly important, because a lot of the things that happen, if not all things that happen in the city, need to go through the board of mayor and aldermen, and that's a small group of representatives of the city. Each alderman represents a certain ward in the city. So when you see things coming forward that you think would be a great impact for the city, voicing your support for those, I think, is a great way to stay involved. Also, participating in events like this, again, staying informed and asking questions. Not everyone's going to know the answer to everything. So if you have a question, we may not always have the answer, but we can certainly find the answer or point you in the right direction. So being active in your community is the best way to create community vibrancy, is people like you guys.
And I'll just add one more item to that list, if you will. I believe when this master plan goes to the planning board for adoption, and they're the ones that adopt it, the planning board, I don't think there's going to be a lot of questions by the board members as to the value of that document. I don't know who might show up to have comments to share with the planning board during the public hearing, because it will be a public hearing for people to weigh in. When we take that after that adoption, and we take it to the board of mayor and aldermen for endorsement, I think that is a great opportunity for anyone that's interested to show up at that public hearing and say, you know what, we've been looking at some of these visions and some of the ideas in here. We think it's great. We hope you support it, because if the aldermen hear that, since they hold the purse strings and they control the policies, if they hear that there's a lot of buy-in from the general public for this master plan that is a product of the planning board, I think that makes it easier. As Jody mentioned before, if someone comes forward to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen requesting something, if they remember, oh yeah, they were all supportive of that document and that's consistent with the document, we're gonna vote to approve that, or we're gonna give them some money. So I think there's some value in trying to stay connected to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen as far as the support of this document.
I see Zach asked when it's going to the planning board. We don't have an actual date set at this time, but we are hoping for either June 18th or around that time. And then once we actually have a date set, we will certainly share that with the YPs, and we'll have that shared on the city Facebook page. It'll be posted in the Union Leader. We're going to try and get as much press out there so people are aware of the date of the public hearing as possible.
And we need to make sure we're giving adequate time per the state statute for notification for a public hearing. So that's the goal. And then, you know, the summer schedule that the aldermen hold is a little tricky, but obviously as soon after an adoption by the planning board, we'd be trying to get it in front of the BMA.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And definitely, if you are interested in participating in that public hearing and staying informed on all things master plan, definitely follow MYP, but also follow the City of Manchester's Facebook page for those updates. As I mentioned earlier, Jody's on our community engagement committee, so I'm sure she'll be sharing a lot of that information and all of that great social media marketing for us to share to you all. So thank you so much for being here. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention some upcoming MYP events for you to put on your calendar. One that actually ties in very well to this program and is in line with some of the topics that got brought up today, as far as really developing the city and making sure it's a livable, vibrant city. So MYP is hosting Spark, a fireside chat, which is an annual event. It's going to be held on June 2nd at 6:30 p.m. on Remo, which if you're not familiar with Remo, it's a virtual networking platform. There will be some more engagement in that capacity and networking opportunities at the beginning of the program. But that event really looks to provide a platform and educate YPs on some of the main issues that are really affecting the quality of life in the city. So our community engagement committee has identified 3 topic areas we'll be focusing on. That's homelessness, housing affordability, and affordable childcare. So we'll have a panel of 3 experts in the city and community leaders speaking to each one of those issues. There will be also a pretty engaged Q&A as well. And what you'll come out of that event having is a list of resources on how to make an impact in some of those areas. So I will be following up with you all with some more information. And I'm sure Jody and Pamela would be more than happy to also respond to some of the questions that I unfortunately didn't get to on the chat. So again, thank you so much. Thanks for spending your lunch hour with us. And thank you to Pamela and Jody and for all your great work on making Manchester such an awesome place to live. I'm so looking forward to seeing this get adopted.
So are we.
Right.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.